Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just at the top of the hour, so we're going to give a few more minutes just to have people dial in, grab any morning or afternoon coffee. So please hang tight and we will kick off in a few minutes. Hi, everyone. I see a few more people popping in. If you missed my earlier message, we're just going to give this a few minutes. We're at the top of the hour. It's going to let a few more people dial in and then we will start. And thank you for carving out some time to join us today. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I know we see a few more people dialing in. I'm trying to figure out where the chat is so I can also just pop this in, but that would be too easy. So I'll just verbally say this one more time. If you guys are just joining, we're just going to give it a few more minutes. Please hang tight. Okay, everyone, last minute or so to grab some coffee or tea or hydration of some sort. We will be kicking off in about just 30 seconds. Okay, and with that, I think it's about time to go ahead and kick off. So, hello. Oh, let me show my video. Help. Let's see. There we go. You guys can see me. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Monique Sherman, Head of Marketing at Automation Hero. Deeply worrying as COVID-19 is, epidemics are just one of the many disruptive events that can hit supply chains unexpectedly, costing business performance. Supply chain disruption is a chronic risk to companies, especially in our highly globalized age where businesses commonly have long and complex supply chains. These supply chain structures are fundamentally ill-equipped to cope with increasing numbers of unplanned disruptions. Businesses must navigate the financial and operational challenges while rapidly addressing the needs of their people, customers, and suppliers. By taking the right actions, supply chain leaders can turn massive complexity and supply chain disruption into meaningful change. We are very excited to have Andrea Hartwig of Deloitte joining us today to talk through these challenges. She's focused in the transportation, hospitality, and services sector, as well as in distribution and transport and postal services. She consults around process optimization, the interface between business and IT, and requirement engineering and agile development. She's joined by Cynthia Almonte, who's a senior product manager at Automation Hero. Cynthia has over 15 years of experience in product and data analyst roles with companies including MarkLogic and Google, in addition to Oracle and Deloitte. I got 2 Deloittes. Dan Campbell is our solution engineering team and is helping companies implement and find value with intelligent automation across their organization. He will be demoing a use case we did with a global logistics company to show you a little bit of what we have behind the scenes. So just a few logistics before we get started. We want to make the most use of your time, so please don't hesitate to send in questions. I was going to say via the chat or Q&A option, but I can only find Q&A, so maybe just do Q&A. We will answer these at the end during our Q&A section, and we'll try to get to all of them, but if for some reason we can't, please note that we will follow up with you separately after the webinar. The webinar will also be recorded, so you'll receive that tomorrow. You can revisit it as many times as you like, and again, always reach out with any questions that pop up after. This is just a quick snapshot of what we're going to cover today, so you can kind of see the outline. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Cindy.
Great. Hi, Andrea, Dan, thank you so much for joining us this morning to talk about supply chain. And Monique, thanks for the handoff. Welcome, everyone. Andrea, supply chain, it's been an incredible time of growth and transition for this segment. I know Deloitte has some recent research. What have you seen in supply chain that's popping out for you that's important for customers to understand?
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia and Monique, for the nice introduction. I'm really happy to be here to show that automation is an important factor for the supply chain and the transport chain, actually. And if you go to the next page, you can see there's a high growing industry here. So on the next page, if you're just clicking there, Monique, no worries, you can see that there is a high growing volume here. So by 2024, global freight volume will surge to 92 billion tons from in 2015, 56 billion tons. Really high numbers. Actually, in my opinion, the logistics sector has always played a key role in connecting industries and economies, and also be responsible for the exchange of goods worldwide. So we have here global numbers and the global growth that we see here. And actually, thanks to the new also digital technologies that we will see today, and automation is actually one of those, is that this high volumes can be really successfully managed. And I would like to show you how this is happening, right? And if you're going on to the next page, we see here some factors which really influences the industry at the moment. So we as Deloitte see those 6 points as endogenous factors, actually. But let me quickly start with external factors. What are external factors? Actually, this can be, for example, risk and interruptions, demand fluctuation, and those factors are really cannot be really influenced by a company, so cannot be influenced by you, actually by a really high degree. But these 6 factors here, which we call endogenous factors, are really can be influenced by a company. And which are they? So we can start with digitalization of business processes. This is actually moving from paper-based, and if some of you coming out of the industry, everybody knows that paper-based or paper is really topic in the industry, and so moving from paper-based to digitized processes is really important. Then we have business analytics. Those numbers which we are collecting all the days helps us to increase transparency with the help of data analytics, actually. And then we're coming to the point of transparency. So transparency on the whole and the full actually transport chain. So at the customer, at the transport company, and all the transparency on the whole chain can be done by technologies, actually. And looking to networking and collaboration, we can talk about digital platforms, which you all know, purchasing platforms, but also vertical and horizontal. Actually, a connection of the network is really important. We're talking about partnerships, about networks that are growing, and collaborations. Yeah. And in the end, one trend which comes up, I think the last also 5 years, is decentralization, which is actually decentralized warehouses, for example, and the hub concept. And of course, what we want to talk today about is automation. And I think, in my opinion, automation increases productivity by a higher degree on automation, on processes, and also on machines. And that's why we have this point here in. And I think, Cindy, you can give me us probably more insight on that topic.
Yeah,
here.
if we jump to the next slide, you know, when we were preparing for this conversation, one of the things that jumped out to me is that so many of the pressures on the supply chain segment right now mirror things that have spurred the growth in RPA over the past 5 years. This greater than 35% growth number reflects a 5-year period, 2016 to projected 2021. It's very clear that large enterprise understands, and rapidly growing mid-size market understands, that to be able to grow, what they need to do is optimize as well as expand their base. So RPA and automation in general, particularly when predictive is blended into it, really makes that something much more attainable for enterprise organizations. I know, I believe, Andrea, I've seen some Deloitte information recently on this. So, Deloitte has a perspective on how this directly relates to the supply chain segment. I think it's in the next slide. Amazingly, it's in the next slide.
Yes, and actually what we have done in 2019 is doing a survey with more than 500 executives around the globe. So from Asia, Africa, Europe, and America, of course. And we were checking how the degree of automation is looking like at companies. So what is their automation strategies? What is the impact on their workforce? And how do their numbers look like? And just to give one number here in the beginning is that 58% of the executives reports that they already have started automation journey. So it's a really high degree. In my opinion, the degree is not high enough, but we are working on that, I think. And one really interesting point that we figure out here, that is not only robot process automation, RPA, which they already implement or where they starting their journey with. They also, or they moving beyond actually, and by increasing their deployment on intelligent automation. So we have here a combination of RPA and AI. And this is really interesting, and I think it's a really feature-driven point here. Yeah,
it's interesting to us when we talk to customers. Pure RPA, swivel chair, automating point and click or copy paste functions. That level of RPA, that's really just the start of the process. That level of RPA, it's obviously great at optimizing, but it's got so many limitations. The bots that currently exist can only follow certain logical rules. They don't see the patterns. They don't enable higher level decision-making in the way that an AI enabled or a smart RPA can potentially do. They don't see patterns. They can't extract meaning from text or images. RPA is really, pure RPA is truly only about processing, handling a registration, advancing an invoice from point A to point B, but there isn't any greater, deeper understanding beyond that. If we click to the next slide, I think I actually found the next graph really interesting, and this comes from another Deloitte piece that we were looking at. You know, our take on RPA is that the low value opportunities in this graph to the right, by and large, have been exhausted in a lot of enterprise organizations. As I was saying, the swivel chair where someone takes information from one system and puts it someplace else to enable the workflow, that's the simplest RPA use cases to capture. What organizations really want, it's the exact same thing they wanted from higher level BI, is to enable decision-making, not just tell me what's happened or do this one thing. Tell me what I need to know to make a decision. Help me make that decision. And that means leveraging advanced technologies, the appropriate advanced technologies and data science to make that happen. AI powers our automations, and it makes them smarter and gives us that deeper level, much richer, smarter decision-making endpoint that we want to get to. And it can power processes end to end. It isn't RPA then Smart automation then is not just a step in the process, it is the end-to-end process. With this, we are seeing organizations completely transform what's going on in some of their business processes. Greater precision, more speed. These systems can process data much faster than individuals can, and allowing managers and executives to make decisions on both structured and unstructured data. And we can leverage both cloud and legacy data, something that can be a real challenge for organizations to enable decision-making. So we see there's 3 specific benefits that are driving this move. Organizations want greater productivity. At the same time, they want to reduce costs. Those two tend to go hand in hand. Accuracy is key, and the machine element of this processing, generally speaking, always has greater accuracy. And an overall improvement in customer experience. And the quicker, more accurate, more productive automations can absolutely support that. Enough talking kind of about slides. Let's talk about some real world use cases. I think that's what most people come to these webinars for. They really want to understand what's going on. Andrea, do you have a couple of use cases or an example that we can talk about?
Yeah, sure. I think one really hot topic is work optimization. So actually moving from really manual processes that people are doing to more automated processes, so that people can really concentrate it on higher level value adding problems, right? And then generating more revenue out of that. So here you have some good examples, but we will go in detail on one example later. So we have, for example, package delivery inquiries, return requests. You can use it by database lookups, or vendor customer information updates. All those things help to optimize the work actually. And to make it more concrete, I really would like to give you an real world example. Actually, this is an example from a big logistics company, actually for service logistics service provider, 4PL, in the sea freight department. So in the sea freight department, they actually just doing 3 to 4 orders per day per person. So the number is really, really low. And how comes that? So they need to do so much manual work. For example, they need to check the pricing sheets on the local regions because they have different local regions, and that's typical for sea freight departments then. And you have some customer specific price sheets which are coming from a different system, and then you need to check the priorities of the shipping companies by phone or by mail, and also and so on. You see a lot of checks, manual checks that you have to do. And in the end, if there is no free allocation, you really need to do this again and again, right? So it's really repetitive work that you need to do. And I think this example really shows in a good way that there are a lot of manual processes, emails, phones, use of different systems, where you really can improve something with automation. Yeah. And I think we have also some really nice second use case from Cindy, with more resource allocation part, right?
Yeah, this is an area where getting the right information to the correct individuals in the way that they need to see it really is important. We talk to customers who have problems around having data across multiple systems, particularly when we're talking about, let's focus and let's talk about inventory and labor allocation. Information can be allocated across different systems, can be running in different systems. That information can be difficult for people to get into and get to when they need to make decisions. One of the things that we've done with a couple of customers is go in with automations, extract the appropriate data, do what would traditionally be seen as almost an ETL process. We extract the information, we transform it so it can all talk to each other. We render it out in reports, get it to where it needs to be by running an automation. And then use appropriate data security to get it to the people who need to make decisions in the time frame they need to make that. So that you could have need to know information secure and in people's hands as they need to make these decisions. It's something that automation does really well and means that you don't necessarily have to go in and replace systems. You can simply layer automations on top of it to enable those systems to help make that decision making. We frequently work with organizations that have multiple cloud systems, on-premise systems, even disconnected servers, older historical information where that kind of the knowledge which is captured in those data sets needs to be blended into the decisions that are being made. Automations work really well in these scenarios. And then when you layer on top of it an AI model that says, okay, here's the condition that's going on now. What's the AI take on how you should be looking at that? So inventory coming into a warehouse and the number of your labor allocation in relation to that, you can look at more than just what did I do in recently. You can look at long-term historical patterns, extract the appropriate intelligence out of it, and come up with a really, really rich body of information to make decisions off of. We have one more though. We were going to talk about claims management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and claim management. Actually, I would love to not talk about that topic because, but it is there, right? But actually, always something goes wrong also in the transport industry, and I think that is what claim management is for, right? But to make it a little bit more concrete, I think you have, in general, you have two sides always on claim management. You have, on one side, you have the freight companies, where you have, for example, damage or lost goods. You have late deliveries because it's a freight forwarder's fault or transporter's fault, or due to any conditions, they were too late, or you have late handover, right? Which is more the company's fault. And then on the other hand, you have the customer. I think you all know it from DHL, FedEx, getting a parcel, right? You have a damaged parcel, for example, or lost goods, or again, also late delivery or no delivery. And in this case, recent years, there were again, we're coming back to manual processes here. So there were a lot of manual processes, getting data from different systems. And in my opinion, automation can handle or can help you to handling of disruptions. For example, with automatic notifications on the participating parties and call for actions, and maybe adjust the processes to where you have necessary changes. Or you have also the processing of returns and refunds. It could be rule-based tasks, for example, or better effective communication between customers and service providers through an automation of email communication, automailer or notifications again. So I think all this really helps to improve the speed of the claims, actually, on one hand, and improve the quality. And I think one really important point is the customer satisfaction. You can really boost and improve it here by doing a good claim management and a fast and an improving quality with data.
Excellent, excellent. But I think most people come to these webinars, they want to hear us talk about use cases, but then they also want to see demos. Dan, you there?
All right.
Excellent. Yep. Dan, can you show us?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Cindy, Andrea. That was very informative. Now I'd like to as Cindy says, show you some of the actual platform here. Before I actually walk you through an actual use case and walk you through the platform, I want to just kind of overview the platform, kind of the 30,000-foot view. So basically, our platform consists of many different components, as you can see here. We have Flow Studio, which is essentially like your blank canvas where you would design these automations. So I like to think of myself as a bit of an artist. But we also have the AI Studio piece of it that allows you to either design models natively in the platform or actually upload existing models. So it's really nice if you have models that you've already built, you can certainly load them and actually productionalize them very easily in our platform. We also have a UX Studio, which we kind of refer to as Robin. What Robin allows you to do is it allows you to bring the human back into the loop, right? So this is where you would design interfaces for humans to interact with the data that's produced from these automations. And I'll actually show you an example of that. We also have Sonar, which is kind of our process mining solution. And that's where you can basically visually identify outliers and identify like opportunities for improvement in your business processes. What's even nicer about Sonar is after you've identified that, you can then leverage those analytics to basically create a model using those various inputs that you have in that process mining graph. We also have an intelligent OCR solution that allows you to essentially, digitize any form, whether it be handwritten or machine print. But for the sake of this actual use case focused around logistics and quote requests, we're going to be touching mostly on the Flow Studio piece of it, the AI Studio piece of it, as well as the UX Studio piece. And of course, underlying this, all of these components is really like enterprise grade security and governance, and as well as a highly available distributed platform that scales very easily, no single point of failure. So it's really, quite a robust combination here. So what I'll do now is actually walk you through an actual use case. And let me just talk you through what the use case will be, just very high level. When it comes down to it, any automation or flow, as we call them, consists of three main components. We have, inputs. So essentially, what is the data you're working with and where is that data coming from? You have everything you do to that data in between, which is like, maybe you're sending it into an AI model. Maybe you're doing some type of, ETL operations or simple mathematical operations on the data, depending on what you're working with. So that's everything in between, right? And then you have the last step, which is the output, right? Where is the data going to? So if you're working with emails that you're, taking in as the source, are you sending an email back out? Are you maybe writing those emails into a database, right? So really, there's almost an unlimited number of possibilities here, but generally, all flows contain those three components. So in this use case particularly, we're going to take a look at quote requests, right? So imagine you have, an inbox that is inundated with all kinds of emails, but you're really interested in the quote requests, right? That's where your real value comes from. It's customers asking for quotes. So our input in this case will be emails, okay? And that's what you'll see on the left-hand side here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to process these emails. And so what does processing mean in this case? Well, first we have to read the email and determine if it's actually a quote request, right? Because if your inbox is like mine, you get a lot of noise in there, right? And we want to actually like separate the noise from like the actual valuable emails, and that can take time in itself. So we basically apply a classification model that says, that assigns a confidence level and determines if an email is in fact a quote request. After we identify that it's a quote request, well, that's great, but we have valuable information in these quote requests, right? Like, where are you shipping from? Where are you shipping to? What are the dimensions of the package, right? Things like that. So then we actually use another AI model that automates that process. So it's basically an entity extraction model. And then after we have completed those two steps, we now have enough information, hopefully, right? Because sometimes people don't always include all the information you actually need to provide them with a quote. And we can take a look at one of those examples. But after you have that information, hopefully you can then actually provide a quote, right? Well, that's also something that can be automated. Whether you have to hit an API that provides pricing, or maybe it's like a database lookup, right? Where you have a, if I want to ship something from JFK to Frankfurt, right? I know how much that costs roughly. So you basically do that price and potentially a discount lookup, right? So imagine this is a customer you interact with frequently. You want to assign some type of discount to them. You can certainly encode that kind of business logic in these flows as well. Maybe you have a CRM lookup, in your Salesforce database. And then after we do all that, we then send these completed requests to an agent to review, right? To put the final stamp of approval on it. And then the final endpoint for this data is ultimately a response back to the customer. So enough of slides. Let me show you the good stuff here. I'm going to share my screen. Let me get the right screen up here. Okay. So what you'll see here is essentially the landing page of our application. What you're just seeing here, it has some nice graphs. It's just showing essentially the system utilization. Now, in this case, this system, right, is running locally on my computer. So we only have 2 nodes or servers, so to speak. But our application, as I mentioned before, is highly scalable, highly distributed. So you could easily scale this up to like 1,000 or more nodes. Maybe you only need those nodes a certain time of the year when you're inundated with requests, and maybe you need lesser or fewer nodes other times of the year. No problem. We scale very easily, right? So let's get into the actual flow. As I said, every flow consists of inputs, the processing between, and outputs. So in this case, we take a look at my inputs here. I'm going to use basically a Gmail inbox. My output is going to be essentially the UX Studio part of it, which is actually a Robin skill. And I'll show you this, give you more kind of color. And then the actual flow is where kind of all the magic happens, so to speak. Yeah. So if I go into the actual flow, and this is a real flow that is pretty robust. It looks nice and pretty, but actually there's a lot of good stuff going on in here. So we essentially read in the emails, right? That's the first step in the flow. We then do entity extraction, right? So when we're actually extracting the information from the email, where are you shipping from? Where are you shipping to? And we do intent detection. Okay, is this a quote request? Is it, someone ordering a pizza, whatever? We do that all in one model, right? Now, this could be just as easily 2 models, but we actually do all of that in this one model. Everything in our platform is point and click. So a data scientist can go ahead and create this model, or perhaps you might want to build your own in the platform. And then I add it by simply just clicking the plus button and then adding a model, right? So that's all happening in here. All of that intelligence is happening in this green box in here. And then just like a human would kind of go through this decision process, right? We now have identified it's a quote request. We've identified that we have a certain number of entities or information from this email. Let's decide, okay, is this a system generated email, or maybe this is an email that's actually authored by a human, right? So depending on which way or what the actual decision is on that, if it's a system generated email, we might not need AI to extract the entities from it or to extract any other information from it because it's highly structured. But if it is a human authored email, we send it down kind of this path here, where we do a little bit of cleanup to the extracted information if needed. And then what's interesting is that sometimes people might ask us for a quote from airport JFK, but they don't tell us that JFK is in the United States and it's in New York. But we need that let's say that zip code and let's say the country code to provide a quote request. Well, no problem at all. We can just do a simple database lookup in here and say, hey, check the database, see where JFK is, so we can then go ahead and query our pricing API. So we do all of that in here. We do a little bit of post-processing in which we generate kind of a unique response ID for that email that's going to be sent to the customer. We calculate dimensions. Maybe sometimes people are mixing the metric system with the imperial system. We can take care of all of that with some basic scripting in here. And then the end result is the interesting part. This is where we send it to the agent, right? So what does that look like? If we take a look at, this is our Robin interface. And essentially you can think of this as like a dashboard for an agent. And this dashboard contains a number of tasks, which in this case are emails that need to be sent out. And in this case, I have, let's say, 3 emails. So if I'm an agent, I'm going through my work queue, I need to process this, right? Well, here's the original email the customer gave us. Here is everything that was extracted from this email with our AI. Okay, and so we're actually giving that extracted information into these nice, neat little boxes here. So the agent can then say, okay, this looks correct to me. It looks like we extracted everything correct. I mean, right? Models aren't right 100% of the time, right? But if they are, it's great. And then we've actually provided a quote, right? Based on our pricing API. Now, we don't give the, we can make fields read only. We can make them optional or required. In this case, we've made the field read only, so an agent can't change that, right? Because it's coming from our pricing API. And then all the agent needs to do when they're confident that we have the right information is click refresh. And then what they have now is essentially a pre-built response that we're going to send back to the customer, okay, with the price. Now, in this case, agent can just say, okay, yep, looks good, submit. And then they can continue going through, essentially their work queue and then submitting items as needed. Now, in this case is a good example. A customer said, I need to ship a box of cargo, to basically Orlando, right? But they didn't give us the origin country, right? Like we need to know, like, where are you shipping it from? We know where you want to ship it to, but we need both pieces of information to provide you with a quote. Well, in that case, we can't provide them with a quote, but we still want to reply to this customer very quick, right? Because the first person to respond is often the person that gets the business. So if we refresh this, kind of generate this reply, we'll see that the reply looks a little different. Instead of giving them a price, we tell them that, dear customer, we received your request. This is what we heard. And then we still need, country and zip code to provide you with a quote. We have their uniquely generated ID. And then the agent says, go ahead and submit. And now you can see here that the queue now, there's no open tasks because the agent has worked all of their tasks. And if I go to my actual mailbox, and then take a look here at what these replies actually look like, you could see here that this is essentially what we just saw on the Robin interface or our UX Studio interface, except these are just emails now that I received as a customer, right? And so you can see this all happens in a very, very short period of time from actually reading the email, doing intent detection, and then entity extraction, doing a database lookup for our price, sending it to an agent, and then basically the customer gets a response. And we don't actually even need to send it to an agent, right? If you wanted to completely automate this, let's say if we have a certain degree of confidence, we could just bypass the agent if that's what you wanted to do, right? But it's completely up to you how you want to design these flows. And you can see here, these are actually the responses that I just submitted, and they're actually coming into my inbox now. So that's a quick walkthrough. Now, obviously, the platform is very robust. There's a lot of other use cases I could show you. This kind of Robin interface, you can use it for invoice processing, pretty much anything, right? If you need to do some type of form review, the quote request is just one example of how you could leverage this. And this is just an example of one flow that you could kind of build in our platform. And there's a number of
question for you. If an organization has their agents supplying information back, does the model improve over time?
Yes, absolutely. You can, essentially what we're doing here is we're capturing this information in a very structured way, right? So there is a benefit to actually passing these types of email requests into a model, because then we extract entities. We have an agent review it, and this creates essentially training data for future model improvements. So the model, will get better over time as you train it on this data. It's a great question.
Excellent. Excellent.
So hopefully everyone found that, useful. I think it's quite exciting. I could talk about these flows, all day, but I know that we have some other pieces of this webinar, so I will stop sharing now.
Awesome, Dan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see the Q&A section. So we're gonna jump over into Q&A. I got a few, while the webinar was going through. So I finally found the chat button. Go figure. So feel free to add that in or any other questions that pop up either via Q&A or chat. But the first one that came through, I think, Andrea, you're probably the best person to ask this. What do you think is the easiest use case for a logistics company to start with?
Good question. I would say depends. No, so I think you need to know your processes well to know the best point where to start, right? So if I go on an automation project, it is always really important to know the processes and where to head in or jump in, right? And a lot of I would start with the manual processes where you really can see that you have some manual processes which could be improved, like repetitive work, and where you have different systems, different inputs, and I think that's a good starting point. So we actually in our projects, we had a lot of projects where we do invoicing, automation on invoicing. So that's, I think, automation of the invoice, the whole process of invoicing is really a good starting point for our customers that we figure out actually.
And just to jump in and leverage that a little bit, we do find that the ERP functions within organizations are excellent places to start. Part of our application, a component that we call Sonar, allows us to plug into data systems and basically analyze and look at your processes. What we can do is we can say, okay, we'll connect to your SAP, we'll connect to your Oracle, we'll connect to your Salesforce, and we'll take a look. And then you can determine from that, what are your best candidates for automation? You may discover that your process is not exactly what that people are not actually performing the process in the way the organization had envisioned, and there's efficiencies that can be produced by leveraging some automation and getting that process in line. And then there's just other processes that jump out that are currently human enabled that automation is just prime for. A quick analysis, kind of process mining, generally speaking, illustrates that.
There's a question that came through, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit because I think, Cindy, you kind of touched on it. The question is, where would I start if I wanted to kick off something like this? But I want to take it a little bit a step back, because maybe somebody's not ready yet for process mining. They're just kind of kicking off their evaluation of getting started with automation or intelligent automation. So this might be a question for all of you guys, because it's more about, look, I'm interested, I haven't done anything. Where would I even kick off? What do I start even looking at to get something like this started?
Mm-hmm. From our perspective, generally speaking, if you look at your lines of business, if you look holistically across your organization, you can easily uncover points of pain. For example, we're dealing with a lot of customers now who have offshored taking work that is on paper, converting it to digital, and then bringing that information back. So maybe they have an organization that they've contracted with, and they're shipping that data, they're sending that data daily, multiple times a day, to an organization that's processing it and sending it back. Easily, that is a perfect use case for automation. That is something that we do on a regular basis. We see many customers that want more control of their data and want to eliminate these external or external resources that they're using to kind of do that processing, or make those pivot those teams to other work and not make it be simple swivel chair function. We also regularly go into organizations and look at what's going on within, say, the interactions between teams. Is the information which is getting from your ERP planning getting to sales, inventory, warehousing within the time frame? Well, we frequently find that there's system problems associated with that, where your ERP planning may be done in an SAP or in an Oracle, and that the information from those systems then doesn't get into the logistics systems easily or on time. Again, another perfect case for automation. And we deal with an enormous number of customers who have basic email problems. Similar to the scenario that Dan just talked about, where we have an info@company.com inbox, and people are sending both things that we don't need to act on and business opportunities into that informational source. We then can leverage what we do really easily to extract what you can monetize, extract what you can act upon, and make your customers happy, more efficient processes within your organization, basically turn information into business opportunities where this is a very classic scenario. And I know Dan has worked on a couple of these where we hear customers say, I didn't even know it was in the inbox. No one knew. Or the person who monitors that inbox isn't the right person, so they don't know what to do with it. We can use automation to leverage that. And that is a really quick win for organizations. And it adds to your bottom line. And in this very competitive, price sensitive segment, I don't see why anyone wouldn't be looking for opportunities to have automations both create efficiencies and impact your bottom line.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Cindy. And when it comes down to it, right, what these automations are really about is they're about freeing up time for people to focus on what humans are really good at, right? Like managing customer relationships. Database lookups, that's something that we can automate, but then with that time that you save, you can then maybe proactively generate new business or better nurture customer relationships. So I think anything that kind of can touch on that would be a really good candidate for this.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of actually at the top, but if people are willing to stay on, it looks like we still got people here, and I've got a couple more questions. So this actually, I think, Dan goes to you, or Cindy and Dan. What level of AI knowledge is needed to use Automation Hero? I know you kind of went through that case study, so maybe kind of shedding some light on how it would be used and who would be using it.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah. I mean, this really, one of the really great things about our platform is that while we give you the ability to kind of create your own models, and in fact, I'm not a data scientist, I don't claim to be. I have created a simple model, for example, for things like trying to determine if an email is an address change request, right? Like these types of like simpler models, I mean, you could certainly build out on your own. And like I said, I'm not a data scientist. However, we do find that there is a lot of value in giving customers a path for letting data scientists load their existing models too. But I would say if you wanted to go ahead and create some very basic models, you don't need to be a data scientist to do so. We have a data science team, right? We do build models, but it really just depends on what your use case is. But generally speaking, the platform is designed to be no code, point and click. So that automation that I showed earlier, pretty much doesn't require you to be a programmer. It doesn't require you to be a data scientist. I just basically added everything in a point and click fashion. So I would say that it's very, very easy to use, very digestible. Yeah.
And to add to that, Monique, one of the things we regularly hear from customers is that they are looking for opportunities to leverage the investment they've made over the past few years in AI. A lot of organizations have data scientists. A lot of organizations have models, and they're really looking for opportunities to make those part of their business processes. We can work in those scenarios as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a kind of a piece of this. I'm going to group two questions together because it's about integration, which we talked about. So databases, systems that you're already working with, legacy systems. So generally talking about integration, but specifically integrated with SAP output. So I think maybe you can talk about a couple of legacy systems and maybe specifically a little bit about SAP.
Dan, you're ex-SAP, aren't you? There you go. I've dealt with a lot of SAP outputs. We can connect and we can access data from any enterprise platform, any cloud-based platform, any connected platform that's within your organization, any platform which is disconnected, legacy data. If you're running legacy on-prem SAP that's in a warehouse somewhere, we can figure out a way to get access to that data. So the answer for SAP, generally speaking, when you're talking about inputs or outputs, is we need to know a little bit more about your environment, about your configuration, and then we will enable the inputs and outputs appropriately. We do it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different flavors of SAP that, I mean, it would really require like just, understanding which flavor you have, and then, essentially kind of just making that a discussion. But generally the platform is very flexible. We haven't really come across a use case or a system that we haven't been able to like really work with. So yeah.
We're even currently working with older legacy systems where, for instance, we use Citrix on old IBM on-prem systems to get access to the data. There's many ways to get access to data. We need to know a little bit more, but we can absolutely do it.
Awesome. I do want to be mindful because I know we're going a little bit over. I will end with one last question. For those that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you guys separately after the webinar. And just a friendly reminder that this will be recorded and we will share this with you after in case you want to rewatch it and relive the adventure and or share it with other colleagues. So the last one is actually about, I'll just read it directly. The spring is the head of one of the biggest food companies. So for example, Tyson, who said the US food supply chain is, quote, breaking. How do Europe's supply chains work differently than the US? And what are your thoughts on how to prevent such important supply chains from breaking? There's a lot there. So Andrea, maybe you're the best person to kick off, and then Cindy, if you got any input. And obviously
let me give you my thoughts on that. So I'm not sure why it is breaking and the reasons behind it, but maybe let me say something about supply chains or prevent supply chains from breaking. So I think it's really important to keep inventories and capacity at a balance, right? To not have too much and not have too less, right? So that's a really important factor. And I think this is a good point where also intelligence come again in, where you can say, okay, I want to do some forecasting, do machine learning, and do all the stuff. So you have the data in your system, or so the case, you just need to use them to prevent such situations and to prevent to be too dependent, for example, from someone. It does not mean that you should not have long-lasting relationships with a supplier or freight forwarder and stuff like this. So that's also really important. But I think you need to build your own system where you're not that much dependent on others. So if they breaking, that you are also breaking up, right? So that's an important factor. And then keep a balance, I would say. That's my opinion on that. So I'm not sure what happens with the food company, but I think in general that's some points or some sort of my, yeah.
They're not using automation, intelligent automation.
Yeah, of course.
One example that I was reading about just a couple of days ago was the breakdown in the upper Midwest. It might have been in Wisconsin, around milk production in the US, where a number of milk co-ops specifically supply to the restaurant supply chain and could not or did not know how quickly to switch production to consumer-based packaging. That's a scenario where ultimately people were on phones trying to find another producer to ship their milk to so that it could be made available, and ended up having to dump product because they couldn't find suppliers in time. That's a good situation where automation can potentially help. But the inputs need to be there. You can't pivot your supply chain from industry to, or from consumer to restaurant industry or back if you don't have those inputs. That's one of those areas where it's a combination of what automation can do and what the organization wants to do.
Fantastic. You guys, we have hit our cap here. So I want to say thank you, everyone. Cindy, Andrea, Dan, thank you so much for joining and sharing all of this. Everyone who attended, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate this. Please feel free. Please feel free, there you go, to reach out. You have our website here, and also you can reach out to us via automationhero.ai for any follow-up questions that you might have. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Great questions, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Right. Don't know if I'm stopping sharing.